Greetings and welcome to the People, Process, Performance, and Practice Conference. The title of this conference conveys an emphasis on the practical aspects of what HR professionals do and how that has changed and continues to change as our environment changes around us. We must be responsive to the current circumstances, but how can we respond more effectively? I know that it is the hope of the organizers to provide perspectives and tools that will enhance effectiveness in these times of new normal. It is good to be with you today. My name is Ginger Ketting-Weller, and I'm the president of the Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies based in Cezanne. I took up leadership here in 2019. The institution I lead is a graduate institution offering master's and doctoral degrees in business, education, public health, and theology. You may wonder, why was this American invited to speak to us? Well, it may be because of my leadership position here in Cavite. Or it may be because I have a certificate from Harvard Institute of Educational Management at Harvard University, where I went for training in educational management, and that included education in broad principles of management. Or it might be because I was a Milton Murray Fellow and was prepared through that program for leadership and philanthropy. It could also be because I am originally from Asia, even if I don't look like it. I was born in Thailand and lived there for my first 5 years. Then we moved to Malaysia, and that was my home from age of 5 to 19. During that time, I attended high school in Singapore for 4 years. I did visit Manila when I was a child. It was raining most of the time, as it is right now, with flooding in that time. And although I never lived in the Philippines, I worked on the campus of Adventist University of the Philippines in June and July of 1988. So, with all my years of living in Asia, I might be able to include Asian perspectives in what I have to say. And maybe it's because I love pancit and lumpia and buko pandan, and I'm discovering new things to love about the Philippines all the time. Or maybe it's because I have a lot of HR-related experience. I've hired people, carried out evaluations of employees, learned how to open difficult conversations with employees, and let people go from their jobs in times of downsizing as well as for cause. Well, I've done a lot of things that cross over into your arena. And there is one more HR-related thing to say about me, but I will reveal it later. As I begin my presentation today, it would be good for me to share with you my core beliefs related to human resources. You're in a profession that organizes and supports employees, and it would be easy with all the tasks that HR professionals have to do to lose sight of the big picture. So let me invite you to step back, take the 30,000-foot view, the big perspective, as I share my core beliefs with you. It's a good way for you to put this presentation in context because you know my values. First, I believe that we must never lose sight of the whole person underneath the shadow of the system. People are not widgets to be moved around or plugged into holes. They have lives outside of work and family dynamics and dreams and health situations and losses and their own set of beliefs, all of which affect them at work. The organization must be able to accomplish its work, but we must simultaneously see each employee as a whole person for whom work is just one part. That whole person focus is one of the most prized values that I bring to my work from my religious beliefs. Second, the organization and its processes will always exist in some level of tension with the worth of the individual employee. Let me give you an example. Due to the pandemic, we have had to deliver all our classes online, not only for our graduate programs, but all the way down to kindergarten in our primary school. Many of you have had to shift your work processes online. In my institution, some of the faculty are aging, and this shift has caused them great stress. At this point in their careers, Some of them don't want to learn new ways of teaching, and they think they can't. But we have no choice. For the sake of our institution, they must learn how to do it. I want to honor our seasoned faculty, but at the same time, we must serve our students. The worth of our individual employees comes into tension with the organizational needs, and we must find our way through this. You have similar challenges in your organizations related to the outcomes of the pandemic. My third core belief related to HR is this: people want to be a fit for their jobs. It's happier when you're doing work for which you are qualified and trained. I believe people want to do their jobs well. When we put them in positions but don't help them with the orientation or the training to succeed, that will affect the quality of their work. And people want to grow in their work situations rather than to stay stagnant. I trust that, being HR professionals, you agree with me on this core belief of the importance of fit for the job. My next core belief is that people who have their basic needs met can work well. Conversely, if they are hungry or worried about shelter or live in unsafe circumstances, they cannot work well. With the devastating pandemic effects on our society, there are people whose basic needs are not being met. Sometimes I see behaviors from employees that puzzle me, and then I find out about the issue of basic needs, and I wonder, what can we do to relieve some of their need? It is to the benefit of the organization to try to help. Workers who feel unsafe, uncared for, unheard, or unempowered to bring about positive change at work will undermine the objectives and the healthy culture of the organization. As a Christian, it is my belief that we are all prone to sin, except by the intervention of God's grace. And thus, it is human nature to seek revenge when feeling that one's organization has been unfair or unwilling to listen and make change. There are all kinds of ways in which people do this: negative gossip, wasting time, stealing, undermining colleagues, unresponsiveness to supervisors on matters of importance. These are examples of symptoms of discouragement or feeling disempowered. And my final core belief: an organization is only as strong as what we are willing to tolerate unaddressed in our weakest employee. In our culture here in Asia, but also in Western countries, we prefer to avoid difficult conversations and conflict. I know that. I prefer to avoid such conversations as well. However, when a worker is not doing adequate work, it harms the well-being not only of the organization, but also the well-being of the co-workers. Here's an example from my world with similarities to yours. At my institution, I have asked for a 24-hour limit on response time by staff to an email question and a 2-week response from teachers with feedback on their students' work. If these response times are not honored by one employee, it can slow down the work not only of our other employees, but also of the students we serve. This is not only true for my organization, but I'm sure it's true for yours as well. Timely response is crucial. Time is money. Time is the reputation of your organization. Time means the difference between a well-working organization that keeps its people moving forward or one that loses both the confidence and goodwill of the clients or the public. Because of this, I believe our organizational strength is only as good as our weakest link. I believe that we must be brave enough to call people to accountability when they don't live up to the expectation of timely response. I've had some of those conversations, and I have seen our level of service and client satisfaction improve as a result. Tough to do, but important. Now that you understand my worldview a bit, let me move toward the meat of what I bring to share with you today. My presentation is based on a book called Reframing Organizations, which was used as the central text when I studied management at Harvard. It's an extremely helpful paradigm that gives us insight as to the various perspectives that people bring to their work. and I think you'll find it very helpful as you work with situations and decision-making in your workplace. The authors of the book are Professors Lee Bowman from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Terrence Deal, who has taught at Stanford, Harvard, Vanderbilt, and University of Southern California. Bowman and Deal proposed that there are 4 frames, 4 perspectives through which leaders can view any situation. The research has shown that leaders who know how to switch frames and see things differently are better leaders for those organizations. I would add that employees who can shift perspectives are also more effective, stable employees. Before I introduce you to the 4 frames, let me set the stage with a case study. It is a true story. Eliza has a management position in her company. In that position, she has been entrusted with the personal information of the clients of her company. Because of her interactions on behalf of the organization, Eliza is able to know the financial status of those who are served by her company. She treats all of these people well, whether they have lots of money or very little. Eliza's family is a very simple one from the countryside. Their education level is not high. Because of the pandemic, several close relatives of Eliza's have lost their jobs, and times have gotten hard. A few times, someone has been in trouble, and they look to Eliza, their family member who is the most highly educated, the one with a steady office job, to help them out financially in the hard times. Eliza and her husband have managed to buy a house, but they are in significant debt, and any unforeseen financial event could take them down. A few years ago, Eliza got herself in trouble with her company. She received a cash payment from a client of her company who was submitting it through her. It was supposed to be turned in immediately to the cashier, but Eliza was in a very tight spot after being pressured to help out a family member with money. In looking at this cash payment, she thought maybe she could submit it after a couple of weeks, once her next pay was deposited to her bank account. When the next pay period came, things were still too tight to pay it from what she had available. Maybe she thought, I'll wait just a little bit longer. Time stretched out for several months. Then the client found out from another person in the organization that his service had not been started because his payment was still owed. No, he protested, I gave my payment to Eliza in cash for her to deposit. The story became known, and Eliza was called in to answer questions. Eliza argued to her supervisor that she was going to submit the money, but she had been delayed by personal hardship. She held her head high, and she would not admit that she had done anything wrong. To Eliza, it was her intent that mattered. Because her supervisor was soft-hearted and he oversaw his area as a family culture, he decided not to fire Eliza. However, she was given a stern warning and verbally put on probation. And even though her work was well done for the next few years, it continued to bother her supervisor that she had not admitted that she had been in the wrong. Now, it is 3 years later. With the new normal feeling very much like a cruel normal, Eliza is beset even more heavily with the dependence of her sisters and their family's needs. She's feeling anxious and burdened, and then the news comes in. Eliza's teenage nephew has been in a cycling accident. Distracted while riding fast, he has smacked into a power pole, breaking bones and sustaining complicated but not life-taking injuries. The nephew is lying in the hospital all broken up, and the hospital has demanded that a large payment be made before they will do surgery. Eliza's sister and brother-in-law have nothing. They turn to Eliza, the relative with a respectable job, and they beg her for help. Their son could be maimed for life if he cannot have surgery. Eliza is frantic. She can't think of any solutions. She can't afford the large cost of the surgery. No one else in the family can help. Her nephew is too young to lose a chance at a useful life. Who has money? To whom can she turn and ask for help? Eliza, sitting in her office the next day, thinks of her organization's clients. These are friends, really, considering all the times she has worked closely with them. Opening her email program, she carefully selects several of these clients who she thinks might respond to her plea, who have good money in their pockets, she knows it, and she sends out an email describing the situation and asking for donations to help. It never comes to her mind that she signed a conflict of interest statement with her organization. It included the statement that she will never use her relationship with the organization's clients for personal gain. All she can think of is her family's need. Now, you are Eliza's new supervisor, and you discover what has happened. One of the company's clients forwards her solicitation message to you and says, "What is this all about? Is this sanctioned by your company?" You are shocked to see from that email what Eliza has done. And you don't know to how many people she has sent it. To call her in, you call her in and confront her with the situation. She breaks down weeping desperately, and she tells you her story. She says that she never once thought about the conflict of interest, and she was simply reaching out to people she thought could help her, people who cared about her. She is very, very sorry, and she expresses that she will never make this mistake again. You are aware of the serious incident in Eliza's past where she kept a client's payment and only repaid when she was discovered. Now, she has solicited company clients for money to help with her family calamity. You are her supervisor. You see her pitiful situation. The pandemic has put so much more pressure on your employees, taking them to the breaking point in several ways. You know this. On the other hand, she has breached conflict of interest. How will you frame your understanding of this situation? How can you decide your next action? I will bring you back to Eliza's case study later with the tools that I now want to share with you. Bowman and Deal, in their research on organizations, actually strongly disagreed with each other on a lot of things. But they did agree on this. When leaders fail, it seems like it was due to their limited ability to see things in more than one way. And when they disagreed, it was because they saw things very differently from each other and could not shift perspectives. The two researchers asked these questions. How do you know if you're seeing the real picture of your organization? Why do people see things so differently, leading to discomfort and disagreement? Why do some leaders or managers seem so unaware of certain things they should see or know? And what are the barriers to the organization moving forward? What are the barriers to employees being motivated and satisfied in their work? As you can see, these are really important questions. The answers carry with them the ability of employees to be flexible when the content changes, when perspectives differ, and when challenges would take them down. The answers carry with them the key to the flexibility of a leader in understanding a new normal. The answers carry with them the ability of the entire organization to shift successfully to a new normal. When a pandemic shuts you down and you're in shock, how do you see a real picture of your organization? How do you re-envision your work and your goals? How do you adjust and come together with others to address the new situation when there are so many different ways to view it? Why do leaders seem to make rules and declarations that don't make sense to some of the workers? And what are the barriers to finding solutions for the organization and their employees? Let me give you an example. I lead a graduate institution. When the pandemic hit, we all went into shock. Suddenly, we were under quarantine. We were shut down from having face-to-face classes. Our graduate institution is of international character, established by a presidential decree in the Philippines. By our charter, we can have no more than 33% Filipino students, by law, in order to maintain that we are international. Now, suddenly, we could not get our international students into the country. month after month, now for a year and a half. We had several international faculty who had been traveling and they were unable to return home to their spouses, blocked out of the country. Like all of you, we had to adjust to wearing masks, to fears of whether we could get the basic necessities of life. Everyone had a different viewpoint. This might be oversimplifying the picture, but let me share my perception over time. Some of our Asians thought we were too lenient with our implementation of standards. Some of our South Pacific Islanders thought we were too strict. I heard a rumor that some were saying that because I was an American president, I would be a lawless rebel who resisted masks and thought that COVID was a myth. It seemed like the Koreans and the Chinese kept their children in their apartments away from others, but the Africans and the Asians seemed to let theirs out to play freely without masks. Some Filipinos could not bear the isolation. Some of our employees snuck into quiet spaces to have their lunches together with the usual social mixing because isolation was too much for them. We asked some whose spouses worked in healthcare to work from home because we weren't sure if the virus could travel home to them and they would bring it to our campus. That did not feel good to them. And in fact, they were not getting sick. So we were starting to look unreasonable. And so it went. Everyone had a different perspective, and everyone was having a difficult time adjusting to the situation for different reasons. How does a work community adjust to a new normal? This is the context in which we will consider Bowman and Deal's 4 frames. Before explaining Bowman and Deal's findings, let's look at some truths that they identified about organizations themselves. First of all, organizations are complex. They are made up of people, and people can be hard to understand and hard to predict. When you deal with diverse people, this only gets more complicated. Large organizations have a large collection of people, departments, technologies, goals, and environments. Something in one part of the organization can affect anything else in another part of the organization, even when they are in separate systems. Organizations are complex. Second, organizations are surprising. You may expect one thing, but something else happens. You may try to improve things, but your actions make it worse. You may think that your organization is doing well, but then suddenly it isn't doing well. You tell people to go one way, and then you're suddenly watching them go another way. Organizations are surprising. Third, organizations are deceptive. There is a set of expectations, but people start hiding things. Or employees are told one thing, but the organization is hiding something quite different. A new initiative might be flawed, but those who see the flaws don't want to tell the leaders for fear of reprisal. One individual who works in a large government agency says it very simply: communications in organizations are rarely candid, open, or timely. Even in organizations where people want to work in integrity, little deceptions can creep in that make a difference. Organizations are deceptive. Finally, Bowman and Deal say that organizations are ambiguous. Figuring out what is really happening in businesses, hospitals, schools, or public agencies is difficult, say Bowman and Deal. Even if you know what is happening, you may not understand what it means or how to respond. You can never see or know everything in an organization. You have questions that are never answered. And when your organization is interacting or collaborating with another organization, that just compounds the ambiguity. What is happening? How does it work? Who is supposed to do what? How will you know if you have succeeded? You have no idea. Organizations are ambiguous. So when something goes wrong with an organization and we're trying to diagnose the issue, there are 3 common mistakes that are made according to Bowman and Deal. The first one is to blame people. Why are we having trouble getting control of COVID? Let's blame the people. It's their bad attitudes. It's their disobedience. It's someone's carelessness. It's someone's stupidity or someone's incompetence. Bowman and Deal say pinpointing the culprit is comforting. It resolves the ambiguity, explains the mystery, and makes clear what must be done next. Punish the guilty one. The problem with blaming people, Bowman and Deal say, is that when you target individuals, you ignore the larger system failures. When you blame people, you oversimplify the problem. And when you point out the culprit, you don't do much to prevent the problem from happening again. It's just shaming people. Another mistake made in diagnosing a problem is to blame the bureaucracy for not being strong enough. If things are out of control, it's because we didn't have clear goals, roles, and rules. What we need are clearer policies and procedures and tighter job descriptions. If we have tighter financial controls, we won't lose or waste our resources. But we also need to understand that the more rules we add, the more we will inhibit freedom and flexibility, stifle initiative, and create much worse red tape and delays for people in getting things done that they need to do. We need rules, but we don't need rules. So what do we do? Many organizations wobble back and forth between being too loose and then being too tight. I've struggled with this in my own organization where our students and our teachers live on our campus. We need rules to keep us safe in the new normal, particularly with a more contagious form of coronavirus on its way. But if the rules are too tight, our students and employees will start experiencing mental health problems as people are isolated and can't go outside in the fresh air and sunshine, and can't worship together, and can't get that social interaction that keeps them balanced. Where is the sweet spot where bureaucracy is enough, but not too much for a group of people who live and work and study together? How do we attain a new normal that is going to foster health in the long run? The third mistake in diagnosing an organization is attributing problems to a thirst for power. This view sees organizations as jungles that are filled with predators and prey. Victory goes to those who are more powerful, more wily, more treacherous. The best you can do from this point of view is to play the game better than your opponent, and then watch for anyone who might stab you in the back, figuratively, of course. An example of this might be the rumors that I have read, which may or may not be true, that the Philippines can't get vaccines to the people fast enough because of corruption from those who would personally or politically gain by intervening in vaccine procurement. Is thirst for power at blame? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. As a beginning assumption, thirst for power is not a helpful diagnosis. Bowman and Deal say that the problem is not that these three fallacies are entirely wrong. The problem is that they oversimplify a more complicated reality. Each is based on a partial truth. Blaming people often blocks us from seeing system weaknesses, and finding workable solutions is difficult. Blaming bureaucracy may or may not be reasonable when you need to find balance for freedom and creativity. And blaming the challenges on someone's thirst for power is too easy and simplistic an assumption. It makes it hard to pursue the collaboration and negotiation that you need to do. People are more complex than that, let alone organizations. Wow, that's a lot of heavy stuff. So let me briefly describe the metaphors identified by Bowman and Deal for people's different perspectives on organizations. This will be new to you, but please be assured that I will explain this thoroughly as we go through this session together. The first metaphor sees the organization as a factory. There are rules and roles in a factory. There is a process for doing things. The work of the leader is to organize things so they run smoothly and efficiently. The organization's ethic is focused on excellence. The second metaphor sees the organization as a family. Workers have needs. They build skills and they value relationships. The work of the leader is to empower the employees to work and interact well. The organization's ethic is one of caring. The third metaphor sees the organization as a jungle. The workplace is one of power struggles, conflict, competition, and policies developed out of struggle and negotiation. The work of the leader is to advocate for their agenda and to build enough of a power base to get it done. The organization's ethic is one of justice. The fourth metaphor sees the organization as a theater or as a temple. The focus is on the cultural stories, the beliefs, meanings, ceremonies, and heroes. The work of the leader is to inspire the people of the organization and to beauty and meaning in their work environment. The organization's ethic is one of faith. Factory, family, jungle, or temple, how do you see your organization? Is the goal to be productive, to care, to exercise power, or to inspire? Now we get to the very meat of Bowman and Deal's 4 frames, the heart of what I hope for you to learn today. From seeing organizations as factories, families, jungles, and temples, Bowman and Deal theorized that these are 4 perspectives that leaders take, and I believe workers do too, as they work with their organization. Those who see organizations as factories see their world through the structural frame. I will explain these in detail shortly. Those who see organizations as families see their world through the human resources frame. Those who see their organizations as jungles see their world through the political frame. And finally, those who see organizations as temples see their world through the symbolic frame. These 4 perspectives drive our problem solving. These 4 ways of thinking are so different from each other that whether you are listening to a colleague, designing a way forward, addressing an issue or a challenge, or identifying what is really important to your organization, you can end up in a very different place from the person next to you. Let me tell you why the 4 frames are important. The research on Bowman and Deal's approach shows that the people who can see an issue through more than one perspective are more effective and successful leaders. It's like they have the ability to look through one frame of the window and then another and see a slightly different view each time while looking at the same organizational problem. I don't know about you, but when I'm trying to navigate the new normal, I want every tool at my disposal. I want to be able to envision solutions that others might not see. I want to feel like I'm not just guessing. I don't want to miss a perspective that would help me see the threats to my organization and deal with them early. I'm looking for some guidance to help me adjust to the circumstance I did not see coming, in my case, the pandemic, but now it requires us to live in new ways. As we look deeper at the different perspectives, think about yourself. How do you typically see your world? How many of these perspectives do you use regularly? Let me pause here to provide you with a visual image. Paul Cezanne, the French post-impressionist artist, heard the words of a critic who was looking at his painting. "That doesn't look anything like a sunset," said the critic. Cezanne shot back, "Then you don't see sunsets the way I do." In today's new normal, people have to find new ways to see things. They must also be articulate and communicate their ideas clearly so that others can learn to shift perspectives when it's needed. And today, in the new normal, it's needed. Bowman and Deal introduced their 4 frames by saying, a frame is a set of ideas or assumptions you carry in your head. As you work with these frames, learn the assumptions and ideas, and then put them to work. Only experience and practice bring the skill and wisdom to size up a situation and use these tools well in our work. We must train our perspectives. The new normal simply adds an additional twist or an occasion to exercise our ability to look through different frames or to switch perspectives. So let's go deeper into the details and get the knowledge we need in order to be able to reframe situations. I'm sure there are some here who see the world through a structural frame. Certainly, all of us know someone who thinks in the structural frame. People who see things through this frame have made the following assumptions. Goals and objectives drive everything. Everyone has their job and place. Coordination and control keep everyone together. Policies override personal wishes or external pressures. Structures must fit an organization's circumstances. Problems and performance gaps can be corrected through analysis and restructuring. These are the beliefs of someone who looks through the structural frame. Now we turn to what actually happens in an organization led by someone who sees through the structural frame. They emphasize goals and roles and formal relationships. They emphasize organizational charts. Responsibilities are assigned to participants, in other words, divisional labor, each person with their specific job and job description. Rules, policies, procedures, hierarchies are used to organize activities into a whole unified strategy. What creates problems? What creates problems is when the structure is poorly organized for the current circumstances. Let me tell you how using this frame has worked as I have led my organization through the pandemic. When we put together our crisis team, I included the vice presidents, the high school principal, and the HR director on the team. That fits an organizational chart, and it ensures that the trickle down of information and policy will go on to all parts of the organization. We discussed together how we must implement the directives of the local government and the Philippine government, and we divided up the labor. We set in place protocols, we directed those who reported to us as to what those were, and we communicated that they must be followed. You notice that problems, when we are looking through this frame, are seen as coming from a structure that poorly aligns with the circumstances. For us, we experienced this with the control of the gate. Some prior administration had put the campus doctor in charge of the company providing security for our campus. But with the increased pressure on the clinic and the doctor getting resistance from those who did not want to fall in line with our protocols, the sudden restrictions as to who could go out and come in from our institution, the doctor simply could not handle oversight of the gate protocols and decisions. Our structure was poorly aligned with our new circumstances of the new normal. So I took the liberty to change the reporting structure. I reassigned who would oversee the security protocols and training and made his reporting duty flow upward to someone other than the campus doctor. The doctor wasn't totally happy, but everyone else was happier, and she did have a lighter load. The reduction of problems at the gate was noticeable. As you can see from my example, the structural frame is a very useful one for adjusting to the new normal. Is your structure working for you? Is change indicated? Are there problems you can solve with restructuring or by calling the employee's attention to the effectiveness and efficiency that the structure provides? Here's an example of what I think of immediately as the symbol of the structural frame based on the factory metaphor. A flow chart showing the relationships within the organization. It can also be a flow chart showing the processes of the organization. Now we proceed to the family's metaphor for an organization. Bowman and Deal call it the human resource frame. Because this is a human resource conference, many of you, but not all of you, likely feel very comfortable looking at your world through the human resource frame. People who see the world through this frame make the following assumptions. Organizations exist to serve human needs. People and organizations need each other. Organizations need ideas, energy, and talent. People need careers, salaries, and opportunities. When the fit between a person and the system are poor, both suffer. A good fit benefits, though. Some would say that a leader is looking to make the organization and the individual to be a fit for each other and for people to feel good about what they're doing at work. How does a leader or an organization work when problem solving while seeing the world through the human resource frame? They emphasize the organization's human side. Organization as extended family or tribe is made up of individuals with needs and feelings and prejudices, skills and limitations. They believe people have a great capacity to learn. They see people as having a great capacity to defend old attitudes and beliefs. The key challenge is to tailor organizations to individuals. What creates problems when people see through this frame? It's fitting the person to the job and when the employee doesn't feel good about their work. Let me once again give you an example as we have used the human resource frame to solve problems through the pandemic. We had graduation just before the pandemic lockdown began in the Philippines in March of 2020. Within 1 week, we were slated to start our intersemester, and suddenly we could not meet face-to-face for classes. One of the first things we had to change immediately was our modality. Looking through the human resource frame, we knew that this would be a shock to our humans. Our faculty and students are used to doing things in a certain way. Some of our faculty members are older and not very technology-oriented, although we do have an online education division. Some of the students also were not very technology-oriented. To fit the humans to the job, we had to do some quick training and then just throw them into the pool, so to speak. To fit the job to the humans, we had to provide some resources, webcams, better internet on campus, purchase of enterprise-level Zoom licenses, and so on. People have the capacity to learn, and in this case, we had no choice. Everyone had to learn. Our older faculty were heard using words they had never used before: Zoom, ring lights, chat rooms, Moodle, that's the open source program for delivering courses online, and you're on mute. That's something you never would have heard in the classroom before. Our people did amazingly well at navigating change, even though it was so stressful. And I would give our organization an A- for fitting the organization to the people. While I've not seen it in our institution, I have heard from fellow university administrators elsewhere that there were people who could not stand the change. There's been a rash of retirements in the university I used to work in the United States. In spite of the supports provided by the institutions, the people no longer fit their work, and they didn't feel good about it. Don't want to change, time to stop. It's okay. Here's the example of what I think of immediately as the symbol of the human resource frame based on the family metaphor. Symbols of a focus on people, recognizing their contributions to the organization and celebrating their achievements. It's the emphasis on the human side of the organization, recognition, affirmation, gratitude to the workers in your organization. Now let's look at the political frame, which is an interesting one. You may not consider yourself a political person, but actually, unless there are leaders in the organization who can understand and can work the political frame, the organization will miss many opportunities. Let's take a look at the assumptions we make when we look at an organization through the political frame. Organizations are coalitions of diverse people and interest groups. There are enduring differences among coalition members in values, beliefs, information, interests, and perceptions of reality. Enduring differences. Most important decisions involve allocating scarce resources. In other words, there's not enough, and so our decisions have to figure out how to split that up and get people moving forward. Scarce resources and enduring differences make conflict central in organizational dynamics. Conflict, and they highlight power as the most important asset. Goals and decisions arise from bargaining and negotiation. The key to understanding the political frame is to understand that third assumption. Political problem solving is simply an effort to get the resources you need for your work or the resources your organizations need to meet their mission and vision. In other words, politics is not bad. It's trying to get enough resource to run your organization. I never once thought I was political until I understood that statement. Then I recognized that I take many kinds of actions to obtain the resources I need and resource the people who work with me. Political, I never thought that I was until I realized that it is reaching for the scarce resources that your organization needs. So how does a leader or an organization work when problem solving while seeing the world through a political frame? We compete for power and scarce resources. We're willing to frequently enter into conflict in order to address needs, perspectives, and lifestyles. In a situation with scarce resources, bargaining, negotiation, coercion, and compromise are a normal part of everyday life, and they bring solutions. Coalitions form around special interests, and those coalitions change as the issues come and go. What creates problems in the political frame? Power is concentrated in the wrong places or is so broadly dispersed that nothing gets done. Remember that when seen through the political frame, your organization is an arena, a contest, or a jungle. It's survival of the fittest, and the strategies for that are quite sophisticated. You may think that I'm a political person from how I've been talking about this. Actually, the political frame is my least favorite frame. However, I admire what it can accomplish. And when I will remember to look at my issues through the political frame, it always accomplishes something, and that surprises me. Let me give you an example. In my last job, I wanted to start a new program. I knew that in order to do so, I would have to convince the governing body, the faculty senate, to support it, and the governing body had twice before denied it to the school where I was the new dean. Having learned about Bowman and Deal's political frame and knowing that the power was concentrated in two places in my institution, the faculty senate and my fellow deans, I started working to garner support. First, I became personal friends with my fellow deans. Somehow the most powerful one liked me, and I tended that relationship every time I could. I wasn't false or fake in my friendship, but I was intentional. I also created a committee to look at the possibility, and I asked that one influential faculty member from each of the other schools sit on that committee, the very people who had resisted it before. By asking for their input into the project, I knew they would take ownership and begin to think of it as their project. And when the time came to take a vote, they might support it. There were some twists and turns in the story, but let me jump ahead to the story's ending. When we got to the final vote with the faculty senate, I had the support of my fellow deans and of the key faculty in each school, and I was able to get the first PhD program approved in that institution. It was a happy moment. This past June, the first 2 PhD graduates received their diplomas from that program. It would not have happened if I had not been able to think in the political frame. The political frame means that you recognize the scarce resources and you use the political tools, friendships, collaborations, negotiations, to try to attain the resources and the approvals you need to survive and grow. Usually you're going to negotiate something that is balanced. Each side wins something as you work in the political frame. For example, another example, our local health unit is doing vaccinations. They need a big space for such a large event. My institution has a large event space, but we need vaccines, which we can't access because so many of us are foreigners. We know that the local health unit might have some left over at the end of their event. So what if we accept their request to hold the vaccination event in our space, and we ask them, could you promise us that the extra vaccines, the ones that you would have to discard because you've already opened the box, could those be available to our more vulnerable employees on a first-come, first-served basis after you've done everybody you need to take care of? Well, I think it's worth asking. In this negotiation, it's a win-win. Each organization could get something they might not otherwise have. There's a big event space for them, vaccines maybe for us. What you're looking for is the collaboration, the friendship, or the negotiation that helps both entities move forward in some way. The fourth frame of Bowman and Deal's four-frame model is the symbolic frame. This one is a little harder to explain, but it is also the most powerful frame in moving people in a particular direction. People who see things through this frame have made the following assumptions. What is most important is not what happens, but what it means. When there is widespread uncertainty and ambiguity, people create symbols to resolve confusion, to increase predictability, to find direction, and to anchor hope and faith. Meaning is found in cultural stories, heroes, rituals, ceremonies, and stories that help people find purpose. Culture in an organization is the glue that unites people around shared values and beliefs. These are the assumptions. It may not be clear yet, and that is because people have a hard time explaining those things that mean the most to them. It's hard to put it into words, but it is those assumptions that guide their work and their decision-making, even when they can't explain the reasons clearly. Does that make sense? Let me keep going, and we'll see if it becomes clear through more explanation and visual representation, because the symbolic is often associated with what is visual. How does a person relate to the world, viewing the world through the symbolic frame? Organizations are cultures that make more progress through rituals, ceremonies, stories, heroes, and myths than by rules, policies, and managerial authority. In my growing up, the symbols and stories revolved around the Bible. My heroes were King David, Queen Esther, the prophet Daniel, and of course, Jesus. My symbols were the cross, maybe the three angels of Revelation 14. My rituals were probably baptism, keeping the seventh day as Sabbath, since I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, and Holy Communion, which is a ritual observed. Another symbol and ritual were in high school. There was the high school seal on the floor of our administration building holding us together. And then there was holding hands together around the pond at our school on Friday night and singing together a Christian song, Side by Side We Stand. It was a tradition. Every community, be it a cultural community, a workplace community, or some other larger organizing community, has stories, heroes, rituals, and symbols. Another belief or another organizer. Organizations are like theater. Actors play their roles and audiences form impressions from what is seen on stage. You see this very clearly in the deep symbolism of a university graduation ceremony with all the pomp and the ceremony and the regalia. Certain things, spaces, times, and rituals are sacred. What creates problems? Heroes mess up their parts. Symbols lose their meaning. Ceremonies and rituals lose their importance to the people. I think some cultures are more attached to symbols, but all cultures have them. In my passport country, the United States, people are very attached to some symbols, the American flag and the bald eagle. I asked some Filipino employees in an office nearby mine, what are some symbols here that strike a deep chord for Filipinos? They thought and thought. It seemed to be puzzling for them. But here's one that I think you will recognize. The power in this black and white cutout picture is what it represents to the Filipino people. Individual rights for Filipinos, out from under the coercion of a foreign power. That is a powerful ideal, and the picture of Rizal is a symbol of that ideal, which is why it appears in many places. The right to self-rule, not be under another power. Even though we have an international high school on our campus, we prominently feature Rizal as a hero in the school because of the ideal he represents, the right to self-govern. Here's another one I found. This one was powerful even for me, looking at this symbol. I have learned that overseas foreign workers are the heroes, our heroes in the Philippines. They have special privileges because they sacrifice to go abroad for the sake of helping their own families and thus their country. Filipinos I have met all over the world have not forgotten this, that their roots are still in the home country. Even if they have children born overseas, those children display the pride of their Filipino roots. This tree shape on its own would mean nothing. It's what it represents that is an organizing idea, a motivating idea, an idea that carries heartfelt value. My roots are Filipino. Regarding the symbolic frame, let me add that a problem among people or in an organization is the most intense when people perceive that their symbols, their heroes, their stories, or their ideals are desecrated. The presenter who taught this concept at Harvard University pointed out to us that people get the most angry when they see their problems through the symbolic frame. You touch something that's symbolic, and I will come out fighting. There are ideals that I have seen in my 2 short years in the Philippines for which there is not a symbol, but they still belong to the symbolic frame because they represent the meaning and identity of being Filipino. Saving face, beauty, family, bayanihan, joy, faith, togetherness, respect for elders. What do you think? Have I started catching on in my 2 years here so far? I think these are the ideals of some description of what it means to be Filipino. Think about what the new normal has done in face of these values. Togetherness has been affected. Families have suffered loss. Churches have been closed or have limited space for attendance, and that affects faith, and so on. The new normal has affected what is so deeply symbolic to us. We could analyze it deeply and discover more. For people who value these ideals as their symbolism, the new normal is deeply traumatic. We must take this into account. Well, let us review. Bowman and Deal have proposed that there are 4 frames, 4 perspectives, 4 worldviews through which you can approach your work. The first, the structural frame, is built on the concept of organizations as factories. The frame focuses on the architecture of the organization, the rules and the policies and the procedures and the roles. The standard processes of the organization are important because they produce an excellent product. We need to be able to see things in the structural way, but it's not enough. The second, the human resource frame, is built on the concept of organizations as families. It focuses on understanding the strengths, the weaknesses, the emotions, and the fears of the people in the organization. It seeks to empower them and place them where they fit and help them grow. We need to be able to see things through the human resource frame, but it's not enough. The third frame, the political frame, is built on the idea that organizations are like jungles, a place of scarce resources where actions like negotiation, collaboration, and even coercion are used to get what the organization needs. It's true, resources are limited, and we need to seek solutions by interacting with one another. We need to be able to see things in the political frame, but it's not enough. The fourth frame, the symbolic frame, is built on the idea that organizations are like temples. There are certain ideas, symbols, stories, myths, rituals, and heroes that are sacred to us, and those drive the heart of our organizations. We need to be able to see things in this way because the symbolic frame shows what is of deepest meaning to us, deepest value. But the symbolic frame is not enough. Bowman and Deal state that successful people reframe until they understand the situation at hand. Let's look at an issue through one frame and then another until we understand the thing we are working on clearly. So now let's finish our case study, taking what we learned. Remember Eliza, the manager who solicited your organization's clients for money to assist her family? How can 4 frames help us with our depth of understanding as we have to decide what we're going to do? Looking through the structural frame, you notice first that you as the supervisor will have to deal with this. It's in the org chart. Secondly, a policy has been broken. There must be some kind of consequences or the policies will mean nothing at all. Now let's shift and look through the human resource frame. You have an employee under stress, in need. If the organization can care a little extra for an employee in need during the pandemic, why not? On the other hand, the human resource frame focuses on putting people in positions for which they are a fit. A manager cannot on their own solicit funds from clients for personal use. With the prior incident in mind, it seems that Eliza cannot be trusted, and therefore she is not a fit for her managerial position. Looking through the political frame, it's quite clear. Your clients need to feel that they will not be taken advantage of by an employee of your organization. You have to build trust and confidence with your clients, or they will not be loyal to you and continue in business with you. This has potential to affect your credibility and income, the ability to negotiate and collaborate, and the organization sorely needs those abilities. Finally, looking through the symbolic frame, you understand why Eliza did what she did, and you feel empathy for her. When her family can depend on her, she has honored family by saving them from their disaster. The ideal of family and of the heroic action someone takes to save their family from calamity is a strong ideal in this culture, and Eliza has valued that. Looking through these 4 different frames allows you to see the complexity of this situation in 4 different dimensions. You appreciate the importance of policies. You understand the stress of the employee while also seeing that Eliza's poor fit for a position that allows access to valuable assets such as cash and clients is an issue. You see the risks of lost credibility and unhappy clients who are targeted by your employee. And finally, you have empathy for Eliza's situation, even if you can't condone her actions. This is not an easy or pleasant situation, and there is no easy or pleasant solution. But looking through the frames, you can see things more clearly. I recommend that you talk this case study over with your colleagues. What would you do next as Eliza's supervisor? Could you be more creative with your next steps? It's time to figure out a path forward. As the authors have pointed out, it can be enormously liberating to realize that there's always more than one way to respond to any problem or dilemma. Always more than one way. A meta-study of managers and leaders who used Bowman and Deal's frames has shown that the ability to use multiple frames is associated with greater effectiveness for managers and leaders. By the way, that super secret quality about me that I said I would share later, as I studied the 4 frames, I spotted my own preferred perspective immediately. I naturally want to see everything through the human resource frame. I'm okay working in the structural and symbolic frames, but I have to get out of my comfort zone for aspects of those 2, and where I really have to push myself is when I'm working in the political frame. But I find that so rewarding. We're confronted with a new normal. We need to be able to take new perspectives when problem solving. I expect that during this conference, you will see new ways to respond to the dilemmas of this new normal. Try as another tool using the frames to look at these things. Let me propose one more case study, a theoretical one. I might be getting out of my depth here with this one, but I'm going to try it because my faith as a Christian and my time in prayer about how to end this presentation prompts me to ask the question, what if? What if? Just about all religions call for benevolence to those who are less fortunate than us. And there has not been a more relevant period in our lifetimes for benevolence and seeing things through the human resource frame than right now, during the pandemic and in the new normal. Let me introduce you to a theoretical HR professional, Benny. Benny cares about the people he serves and supports, and he knows that every human being has a deep need to give to others. As a Filipino, he understands the value of bayanihan, ordinary people gathering together and each one doing a little bit to address a challenge or a calamity that is larger than all of us, so that the solution becomes truly heroic. Benny furthermore senses that the employees of his organization are starting to feel discouraged as the pandemic just drags on. Offices close down from time to time as several people are tested for COVID and are positive, and then reopen again. And then it happens again. It is not a happy task to inform the public that they cannot be served during this period of closure. It's a little bit embarrassing, in fact. The work piles up and people are delayed while they wait. Benny understands that in order to be mentally and physically healthy, people need to be able to give to others, to serve, to be together, to participate in outreach and help others. No one employee has much, but there are such big needs out there. Perhaps the Filipino ideas can be tapped for the good of everyone. Let's stop for a moment. Benny is working in the human resource frame as he thinks about the needs and the morale of the employees. That's a human resource thought. He's also working in the symbolic frame as he thinks about the religious ideas of benevolence and the Filipino ideals of bayanihan and togetherness. Two frames he's using. An idea has begun to start, and he's bringing a few people together to hear his thoughts. Then he approaches management about the idea of an organization-wide outreach project, and he solicits their support. This team, led by Benny, calls a meeting on Zoom. The idea of an organization-wide outreach project is floated, and the employees are sent randomly to breakout rooms within Zoom to brainstorm in small groups. They're given a challenge. Brainstorm an outreach project that will involve a little bit of help from every person, will help people in need, will be pandemic compliant, in other words, masking, hand sanitizing, distancing, safety consciousness, and involves a bit of fun and food for every person giving of their efforts to the project. Appoint a reporter in each group, and when the whole group is brought back together to the main meeting, each group's reporter will give their idea. In the Zoom chat, people can ask questions, and the ideas are written down. At the next meeting, Benny, who has consulted with management about what they can support, brings back the ideas that management believes they could support. There is time, once again in breakout rooms, to discuss the ideas, and then people are brought together in one big meeting on Zoom again for questions and comments. A live poll is posted, and everyone gets one vote. Which project do you want to do? The winning project is organized carefully. And on a weekend, the volunteers for the front lines show up to enact the project. Pictures get taken, the accomplishments of the project are documented, and they're celebrated publicly on social media and press releases, in pandemic-compliant ways, of course, by everyone. Let's get back to Benny. He started working in the human resource frame and the symbolic frame, but very quickly it moved to the political frame as he solicited the support of leadership and of a team around him and got them on board. And as he negotiated with tech support for the capabilities of meeting online, breakout rooms, and voting online, they had problems to solve so that all employees had technological tools and access to even meet together. And then the political frame asks, how can we negotiate for scarce resources? Benny had to work through that, and he worked with leadership to do it. And then there was the structural frame. Approvals had to be gotten. People had to be assigned to roles. The process had to be organized to flow smoothly and systematically. Even the structure of the online meetings had to be carefully planned. Benny and his team were able to see their project through each of these frames to make a successful outreach project happen. The employees loved it. They had fun. They made the world a better place. They worked together. They accomplished their outreach in a new normal kind of way, making friends and laughing often as they did it. And you know laughter is a value here. They let their benevolence shine. And in turn, it blessed each one of those who participated, as well as those who received the outreach. Bowman and Deal note that there is an artistry or creativity that arises when we work with a consciousness of the four frames. They ask this question, and I would ask it of you too. How can you reframe your personal and organizational situation in the new normal to be an artist in finding and developing solutions you have not seen before? If you have an interest to know more, I recommend Bowman and Deal's book, which is now in its 6th edition, if you would like to go deeper into this concept. While the examples they use are from a North American setting, I believe the principles are not culture-bound. Thank you for your time today, and I wish you God's richest blessings as you continue in this conference, re-envisioning your work as human resource professionals in a world where we have the opportunity to become artists in the new normal and have it work for all of us. You will be artists as you take these things and put them to work. Thank you so much.